this is a perfect ending for this character. The 8th and final season of Game of Thrones is 5 years old this month, and right up front I'm gonna apologize for making you think about the 8th and final season of Game of Thrones. We don't think about that season for very good reason. It ruined the series. Completely threw out pretty much every character's development. None of the prophecies mattered. Jon being the heir to the throne didn't matter. Arya being a faceless man didn't matter. Bran being the three-eyed raven didn't matter. The Battle of Winterfell killed 4 characters, none of which were main characters, and we didn't care about 3 of them anyway. Arya got the kill on the Night King, and he never even got to cross swords with the character that the entire series is named after. Pretty much every character except Podrick, I guess, had the worst ending imaginable. And the final 3 episodes alone are so unwatchable that it completely ruins the rewatch value of what was once the greatest series of all time. That said, there is one moment in the final season that people really seem to hate that in actuality is actually a very perfect and beautiful moment. And to make it even crazier, it's something that occurs in the 5th episode, and the penultimate episode of the series, The Bells, regarded by many to be the worst episode of the show. And that moment comes at the end of the episode with the death of Cersei and Jaime Lannister. Now, to be fair, the circumstances that led to these 2 characters dying aren't great. Jaime left Winterfell and Brienne and went back to Cersei, and I know we all have thoughts on that, but I'm not here to specifically talk about that. And shortly after he hit King's Landing and tried to fight his way into the city, he got into a 1v1 with Euron Greyjoy and was fatally stabbed, but his love for Cersei kept him going to find her. Or in other words, he had some ridiculous plot armor. During Daenerys' ransacking and burning of King's Landing, another thing that we are not here to discuss today, Jaime manages to find his sister, now attempting to escape the Red Keep on her own as the entire city crumbles around her. Qyburn is dead, the Mountain is off dealing with some fan service that had to happen, and the entirety of the Kingsguard is gone. And this is where we can properly talk about why I think this scene is really good. Throughout the entirety of Game of Thrones, Cersei was always shown to be like 10 steps ahead of every character, and she was never truly alone. She always had her children. She had Jaime for most of the show, and later on she has Qyburn. She still had some of her children, and then when she became queen, she had all the attention of King's Landing. Cersei was never shown to be alone physically, romantically, or emotionally at any point in the show. Whether or not we like the reason why it happened, the fact that in this moment we were seeing a Cersei who was truly alone was a very poetic and beautiful place to end that character. And to me, speaks to the genius that the series had, even as it was wrapping up. Taking the main villain of the series, because that's what Cersei Lannister was, she was the main villain, and dropping her down to a level where she is like everyone else in the city. She is alone, she has to fend for herself, and she has to try to escape, is the caliber of writing that you would have seen in the earlier seasons of the series. So there is a certain beauty when her brother finds her, and there's a sense of hope that goes back into both of their eyes. Cersei is not alone in this moment, and Jaime found the love of his life. Before I can proceed, I have to talk about something I really hoped I wouldn't have to talk about because it kind of breaks my heart. And that is Jaime Lannister's character arc. One of the biggest criticisms of Season 8 is the way in which Jaime Lannister's character is handled. Because going into the final season, he was most people's favorite character, and if not that, he was in the top 3. Yet if you talk to anyone about Season 8, very high up on their list of complaints, you'll find Jaime's character arc. It sits somewhere between Daenerys burning King's Landing and Bran being crowned king. The argument is that the writers completely threw out Jaime's 7-season redemption arc in favor of having him run back to Cersei and die with her. Are those people right? Kind of. And I can hear the pitchforks. The problem itself does not lie in the fact that Jaime goes back to Cersei. I actually think this is a very poignant character moment. I was always under the impression that he left Brienne because he has his own inner demons about Cersei, and he's so tethered to Cersei and everything she has done and everything he has done for her, that regardless of how much he has been redeemed, he cannot break free of that. And that doesn't necessarily negate the redemption arc. It just adds a bigger sense of tragedy to it. The problem, however, lies in the reasoning that he gives to other characters. He describes himself as hateful to Brienne, and he says this to Tyrion.
To be honest, I never really cared much for them. Innocent or otherwise.
He killed the Mad King and got the name Kingslayer because he cared for the people of King's Landing.
Where's my sister?
I guess the writers forgot about one of the best moments in the show, but then again, I'm not surprised.
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
The point I'm trying to make here is that having Jaime run back to Cersei is not inherently a bad moment of writing. It's the rocky steps that we took to get there that make it bad. But an argument could still be made that Jaime's redemption arc remained intact. And the reason I have to go over that is because of the moment in which they die. Jaime's plan is to get Cersei out of the city by bringing her through the crypt, deeming that the safest way. And yes, I'm aware that the rooms beneath the Red Keep, it's not called the crypt, but it's easier than saying the room where the dragon skulls are, so I'm gonna call it the crypt. So when Jaime gets his sister down into the crypt, he realizes that all the paths out are blocked due to the Red Keep actively collapsing around them. What I've always loved about this initial part is the reversal in which these two characters handle the issue. Jaime is always the one depicted as realizing there is a problem. His character arc pretty much starts with that idea. And Cersei has always been the one who considers herself the smartest in the room, always has a plan, and is always on top of it. This completely flips that. Jaime's only mission in this scene is to get his sister out safely, and he will stop at nothing to do that. That's, plot armor aside, the reason he lives so long after being stabbed by Euron. Whereas Cersei immediately freezes up, and it starts to sink in that there isn't a way out. The exchange that follows between the two siblings is among my favorite of their interactions, with Jaime coming across as strong and trying to be there for Cersei while simultaneously accepting that this is where he dies. And on the complete opposite end of that, you have Cersei, who is panicking and coming across almost as a scared little kid who is unwilling to accept that this is the end, and she's going to lose her unborn child, the love of her life, and everything she has ever cared about in one go. But at the same time, she has Jaime with her. Jaime's line of,
Nothing else matters. Only us.
Has stuck with me ever since I watched this episode for the first time 5 years ago. It's such a brilliant acceptance of death from two characters who have always found ways to survive. Jaime letting Cersei know that it's okay because he's gonna be here with her, and Cersei accepting that Jaime, the love of her life through it all, is the one that's gonna be here with her at the end, just as he has been for the rest of her life, is the caliber of writing that you would get out of earlier seasons of this show. The actual method in which Cersei dies has always gotten hate from people, but I have always respected that they did it this way. In retrospect, Cersei being held by Jaime and crushed by the Red Keep collapsing, in a way representing her being killed by her own sense of pride and desire for power, is ultimately the only way that Cersei could have died. And as for Jaime, it's a brilliant death for him as well. Jaime's ultimate downfall and the last act in his life being to pay for everything he did for Cersei and being unable to break free of the grip that she had on him is just as fitting, if not more fitting of a death for Jaime than it is for Cersei. But back to Cersei, the biggest criticism that people have of this scene is that the main villain of Game of Thrones dies in an anticlimactic and almost unsatisfying way. But I kind of think it's better that way. I think that giving Cersei a spectacular and epic death would be a disservice to the character and ultimately fall into the bad writing category that most of the rest of this season falls victim to. Cersei dying in an epic confrontation, getting killed by Dany or Jon or Arya or even Jaime would be the easy way to go. That's what we want to happen. But that doesn't make any sense for the character. Whereas paying for all of her pride by losing all the power she has ever wanted and being crushed by her own kingdom while a war rages outside, not being killed by a Stark or a Targaryen, is not only a fitting end for her character arc, but makes perfect sense for how Cersei's entire story has gone for 8 seasons. I know it's not what any of us wanted, but that speaks to the genius of Game of Thrones. Some of Game of Thrones' best moments occur when they subverted our expectations in service of character. Season 8's problem is that it subverts expectations just to do so without giving any attention to character. But Cersei's death falls into the category of the former. Ned's execution, the Red Wedding, Jon getting assassinated by his own brothers, most of the moments in Game of Thrones that people still talk about all these years later are moments where the fans did not get what they wanted. When the writers broke our hearts to serve the characters' arcs. That's what Cersei's death does. For 8 years, everyone was talking about when Cersei is gonna die. Audience and characters. It's all they talked about. She was the main villain of the series. Yet, when she does die, it's kind of sad and depressing. But that's the point. You're not supposed to like it. You're not supposed to cheer, and you're not supposed to be happy over Cersei dying. Which is what would have happened if she died in the way in which all of the fans wanted her to die. There's a reason that the fan servicey moments of Season 8 are disliked. Because that's not Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is the main villain getting unceremoniously killed by her own hubris in the arms of the man she loves, getting him killed and the unborn child killed in the process. Game of Thrones is the character that you've spent 8 years waiting to die, going out like a scared little girl and not a badass queen. That's what made the show so great, and that's what makes Cersei's ultimate downfall in the show so great in a season that forgot what made it great. Just some food for thought. I always wonder how people who hate Cersei's death feel about other deaths that are like it. For example, this is just as anticlimactic as this.
I won't leave you.
To me, the death of Cersei Lannister has always been a masterpiece of a moment in an otherwise horrendous final season, and sits for me as an all-time great Game of Thrones moment. Alright, I am sure that the like to dislike ratio is going to murder me on this one, but that's okay, we don't all have to agree. I just wanted to say my piece on this very brilliant scene. So let me know your thoughts on it, and maybe I changed your mind on Cersei's death. Maybe I didn't, maybe I missed something, But that's what opinions are for, and that's what art is all about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in whatever the next one is.